Welcome to Wickerson Studios. My name is Michael Wickerson, and I'm bringing this down to the most basic level I can from the C# nodes I have been pulling from online and customizing and changing. And I'm ranking them, and as you can see here, I'll just pull this down here. Actually, well, yeah, I'll pull it down here. Basically, I have a series of, this is kind of the C component, which started with, I believe, Ryice's site, the nodes that were in use, and I'm trying to customize and organize and know when to use them. I've extended that as well. That will go into the Rhino geometry tools in time, and I will have, actually, click this one, I will have a ton more to organize, and they will be broken into points, curves, surfaces, breps, meshes, and things like that. And I will try and customize each one as I go. So I feel like I've developed a little more than just the very basic scripts that I think everybody who starts to think of transferring their Rhino script syntax into Rhino Common, be it the GH Python node or the C# node, and maybe into C# scripting into Visual Studio so they can do their own plugins. So I'm not quite there yet, but I will take this to the next level. And then I also have the Warsaw. Oh, this was a few algorithms that I was looking at. And of course, I'm trying to problem solve any that crash as soon as they open them because they're bad while loops and things like that. I do believe I have my own kind of plugins I'm thinking of developing, and wherever this Warsaw Tech Department was, you're going to see a reiteration. I started organized by letters there. I thought that's the best way to start. So my goal is to go in here and be able to have all of these scripts. Let me pull them down here, right here. Actually, that's not where I want to go. I want to go into File, Folders, User Objects. What you'll see is I'm planning on bringing each one through, and I've done the first 38 and started to categorize them by letters. And so the letters are starting to make a little more sense down here. These are all nodes that I've made work. I've customized a bit, and then I've also ranked them. X is going to be the basic, Y is going to be the intermediate, and Z is going to be, you can tell my Canadian there, Z is going to be the more advanced nodes as we go through, and hopefully these will even excel and become what I will consider, advanced in my sake of what I can do. Let me grab this one here. Um, where was it? I didn't have it open. What I think is, if I was to open up one of the Wickerson Studio nodes, maybe let me jump in here and grab, where was it? Wickerson Studios examples. I think here you'll see that there's a complexity. I better open it. Looks like something crashed. So this one is what I would consider more intermediate, or extending the intermediate into a node system by using the basic nodes. And then the real difference would be file opening something like going into C and going into parametric house, master camp here. Oh, those were all the tests that I still want to get through, but they're in Visual Script. I just want to show the parametric code all. So this would be one that I did, Jose Luis, and packing it into a really advanced one. I doubt I'll be posting those because that's all his material and his intellectual property, and that's incredibly complex right before you go into Visual Studio. So I'm going back to the basics. So let's go back to this green, yellow, and red. So ready, set, go. And what I've done is gone in and said, okay, I think these scripts, and I can move my face back up here. Beautiful bald head. Got it all shaven for the new year. You can see that in the green section, I may link this onto my Patreon if the scripts are something I can script from scratch. I don't want to take anybody's, and I don't think there's a lot of hidden intellectual property when it comes to something like writing a script as simple as this, but they are in order and they are coming from examples of Ryice's page. So you could go there and find that one out for free on Rhino Developer. So these scripts will be test for even numbers, create array weekdays, create list workdays. These may be familiar to people that have gone through those handouts and those videos. You'll see here between numbers 1 and 2, and you literally have your inputs and outputs. You'll loop to print a series of numbers, and that will probably use single access, item access, opposed to list access and tree access, which get progressively more complex for each element in list. And what's nice here is you can go in and you can see exactly how that script has to look. And I'm using an example she used from the cities, but you can change it to whatever you want. This is actually scripting through a string. I don't do much with strings because I'm mostly in the data that is going to be numerical. But I thought, these examples are there to take a look at. There's some great enumeration tests that go through traffic lights. and testing for positive zero or negative numbers. Those are the if else, and else statements. So a little different from Python, but it'll get you thinking that way. Once you got that under your belt in the sense of how you know how to script and code, you might want to jump onto the intermediate. But before you do that, this was an example of a script that was written to produce a sphere. So you have this origin, you get the point origin, you get a radius and height. And what I'm doing is just building a node system and this is good exercise. So just grab out another one and call it, I don't know, there's so many different ways to make boxes, but you could go in here and do box, and then when you go into the script, you can produce that to another geometry. So you're learning the script this way by using the grasshopper nodes in C#. So open it up, and you'll see what I've already got. The initial script was just sphere, point, sphere, and you create a new sphere at point radius, and then you have it. And then I ran the iteration number just to give something to the output line if I wanted to see it. Then I wanted to make a cone. So I jumped in here, and I was like, all right, the next one will be a cone. What do I need for a cone? So you may have to bring in an input. You may be able to go after the geometries before it, and there you see it. And I'll just separate this one so you really get a sense. The cone is going to need a world plane, so I could have created a plane. You could go back up into here and then start to create a plane. And what's nice with that is a plane, as say, let's call it just point plane to be consistent, is going to be a new plane. And what's nice is you hit that parentheses and boom, you've got 5 different ways on your tab to create this. You'll need a plane other. You'll need a 3D point and a 3D vector normal. You'll need a 3D point origin, which you can just grab as a function. You can just grab a point origin from any point, which would be your initial point, PT. And you need a vector 3D in the x direction, a vector 3D in the y direction. So you can keep doing this, and you'll get better and better at learning how to do this. And I'll just leave that one in there to see if somebody wants to produce a plane that way. Of course, I just produced it in-house on the cone one here, which said just pull it from a world plane using the .NET format, which I'm really clicking in my mind finally. It's funny how things seem so simple when you finally get them, but how difficult they were until you got there. And then I'm just outputting a cone. Then I did the same for a cylinder, but the cylinder depended on a circle, so I could type in an output to a circle as well if I wanted to. Just put in circle here equals PT circle, and that would have popped out here. So I just keep going. Now, if you get too jumbled in your script and and you're not using one geometry to feed the next one, then you probably want to leave it, go in and create another node and continue. But that's the exercises that I'd like to see people do. I'm building this for sculpture department and undergraduate school at the Kansas City Art Institute. I'm returning to my algorithmic modeling classes and my human hand digital sculpture classes, and I fully intend to introduce this type of computational work to that school, and certainly back into the fall as we head back. I still have another semester of just administrative and teaching the major studio, but this is going to come into play. The next set, and I haven't decided if I'm going to just take all of these nodes and scripts and put them in a sense of over here, just drop them into like tiers on to give access to them. But they seem a little too simple to be trying to get people to give you a little stipend so they can have access to them real quick. But it does beat generating them yourselves or organizing them, having them all sectioned off to you. So I might, in a sense, put that into practice. It's not that this is a profitable business on its own, but it certainly is wonderful to keep learning new things and have it being a lifelong learner. So that's why I'm doing it. I am into it for the learning and for the teaching. And so the next one is where I took a bunch of scripts and I decided, okay, they're a little more intermediate C-level scripts. And of course, I have to create spheres, which you saw over here how simple it was at the basic level. But if you're starting to deal with pulling in lists, so you start to do list access, or if you go over to intermediate to this access and start dealing in tree access, you're going to find those scripts start to become, even producing spheres, more and more complex, and what I refer to as nested, because that's exactly what happens when you're starting to use the GH path index, which gets very interesting when you start creating GH paths. And the Warsaw University ends with 2 pages on those, how to get into them, how to write paths as numbers, and actually wrapping my head a bit around that. So I'm pretty happy with myself. That said, we're back into here, and so I go into here and create a list of spheres by scripting this way, and you can see how it's starting to get a little more complex as it runs through a for each loop. Well, I'll do the same thing with cones and with cylinders and boxes until I get better and better at that, and then I'll go on to the tree axis and get better and better at that. So I do have a method to this madness. There isn't really any particular interest as to why I'm doing it outside of this is something new to learn. So there I have processing one item one at a time in a list. I have processing a whole list of numbers. I have, and these all come from RaiIce's site and NextList, processing the whole list and producing a sum of that. And I think there's a sum of trees, which is very interesting. It takes all the data on different tree lists and adds them up. And that's a very cool little script that she put together in there. And I definitely think of that as more intermediate. And it's just a for-each loop within a for-each loop. So pretty interesting to see how you're treating the branches first and then the items on the branches to add them up. Pretty simple looking script, but I put it in the intermediate because it does. As soon as I see things moving in the list and your dash lines in Grasshopper, solid lines become double lines become dash lines, and I think you're going to advanced level. Back into some string text using the weekdays and then incrementing units to a positive limit. So you can set that up as a data structure. I think there's a bunch of things in here. The Collat's conjecture was a cool one. It always outputs 1, so it's not really a structure that you're really going to use too much. And then I've got a few string examples that she uses with fruits. And then you've got a method for multiplying and adding, and it's getting a little complex, so why not throw it in the intermediate? Finding prime is a pretty base exercise if you're going through eddy coding exercises, so you'll want to see the logic of how to do that. And then really getting into the difference between value and reference within your scripts and how you want to use those so you can actually change the input data coming in as opposed to keeping that the same while you're working it within the method or the function or whatever you want to call it. The iteration exercise works, but I had to delete my iteration was fine. I believe it was over here on this one. I thought it was on the C. My iteration was working, but my recursion wasn't, because even though I took it from a script that had some inputs that didn't go to 0, sometimes when you bring a script in that you've made up here, it'll crash your computer. So you have to be really careful, and those are the little catches that I'm trying to make. The last exercises I put as advanced, and they were examples that she was using. One being the tree access to creating spheres, which I thought was nice. Definitely constructing a tree from numbers. I love this script. What a way to control. And I did a little play in there. That's not all hers because, RaiIce did it, but I started to do a little multiplication here, just a little bit of number playing. And all of a sudden you get this incredible tool for beginning any data on going into a structure with trees. So if that's not making sense, that's when I really like constructing tree of numbers. You'll see it used in my sample videos and tutorials off the bat. And then there's a whole structure of a bunch of structures dealing with making colors match. And that's more kind of front end stuff, in my opinion, HTML and making pictures and colors. And I'm not really into it, but I did use those as examples. And then the reading text to points was very nice because I actually went into not really have my head around grabbing files. It's not something I've been used to thinking about, and I don't work that way on the computer. This is like one of the only softwares I like and I play with. But if I go into the primitives, there should be something in here in a file path. Definitely using text notepad is a way to bring in some data and then processing it through that. So that's a nice little example. I'll just leave that in there and maybe tuck that in, add to group. And it's not plugged in there yet, but there it is. So that's how I'm going to start. And then what I'm going to do after I've done this is I'm going to hit the Rhino geometry very hard and structure that into basic, intermediate, and advanced, what I think. I'll probably then go into Warsaw technology department, which I had. And by then I should have many more complex scripts coming out from dealing with the tutorials that I'm doing through Jose Luis on parametric code. And I'm also once a day trying to produce something interesting in these examples. And I haven't really brought them in yet because they're clusters of nodes. But to me, this is where I'm at. I am right here between Grasshopper and C#, somewhere between node scripting and Visual Studios. And I haven't really decided where on that balance I'm going to end up and where I'm going to flop. And so that's why I think that Patreon might be a good system for me to start introducing some of these interesting, creative, custom files on C and seeing where other people's particular interests are. And of course, I'm not going to say I'm going to follow the money because I'm going to do it either way, but it would be very telling, just like the analytics on the Facebook groups on GHPython and the C#. But I must admit, the GHPython node in Facebook group is it's been around a little longer than the C# private group, but the one is growing, like that compared to the C#. So GHPython is where people really want to go. And I think because it's a simpler form of the coding and scripting when you learn it. Certainly C has slowed me down. And until I get through a few more of these texts and all the videos of Jose Luis and then applying them, really getting in there and getting my fingers around these scripts and changing them, otherwise I'm just pushing and pulling nodes and hoping to see an output that I like. What I'd rather do is be able to open up at any point these scripts, be it complex or difficult, and saying, hey, listen, I really want to change that up. I want to do some other added points. I want to get in here, change the iterations, start them at different points. It's not a huge script, but that's a really nice one for the Bezier curves creating different curves and cutting them up using the Castello's formula. So the point is not to have one and just pop it in like you were normally going into here and grabbing a transformation node or a surface node or a curve node or a vector node. You want to be able to go in there and do something. Obviously, there's ones that are going to hold me back, the variable pipe, graph mapper. I'm rambling on 15 minutes, but hopefully people understand where I'm going and I didn't cut this video off short. So Michael Wickerson, Wickerson Studios, very excited about where that's going. Green, yellow, red, where do you stand? What do you want to do with this? How could I help? Am I pointing anybody in the right direction in a way that maybe didn't exist there before? And is what I'm doing any bit valuable to anybody? Any encouragement is encouragement. So thanks very much for watching.